The Audio Drama Initiative presents Closing the Distance.
Hi, I'm Tawni O'Dell, here to introduce the final episode of the first season of Closing the Distance. I was out driving a few weeks ago and noticed a startling splash of scarlet and emerald green in a tree. I knew there weren't wild birds that color where I lived. I slowed down and realized it was a parrot. I called local animal control. They arrived and took over the situation, but my writer's brain couldn't stop thinking about this bird. How did it get out? Was its owner going crazy looking for it? What if your pet was your only companion during the pandemic and you lost it? A story took root in my head about a young woman who was always too busy to get to know her neighbors, and now, during lockdown, finds herself thrown into a life and death situation with one of them when she finds a lost bird. As her career takes off, you're going to be hearing plenty about the talented and exciting young actress, Brolin. For now, I invite you to listen to her wonderful performance in Windows.
Before we were told we couldn't leave our houses and I had all the freedom in the world, I never bothered to meet any of my neighbors. I never even noticed who lived across the street from me. It's true, I only moved here 2 years ago, and between my job and social life, I never spent much time at home, but still. I started looking out my front window a few weeks ago purely out of boredom, and that's when I saw her. An elderly woman pressed up against this window, looking this way and that with a sort of urgency. I saw her again later that day doing the same thing. Then I saw her the next day, and the next. I wondered what was going on. Was she frantically searching for something outside her house, or was she looking for someone to save her from something inside her house? So this thought kept crossing my mind, but I'm ashamed to say I never did anything about it. Even though I was bored and scared and alone, I was still able to find ways to get through the endless days without walking across the street and knocking on a stranger's door. The next day, I was standing in the kitchen when I noticed a splash of brilliant purple in the tree outside the window. The color was so extraordinary. At first, I thought it was a piece of tissue paper, the kind you put in a gift bag, or maybe a scrap of mylar from a rogue balloon that had blown away from a party and got stuck in the branches. But I gave it a closer look and realized it was a bird. I knew it had to be someone's pet. There were no wild birds that color. The thought depressed me. It was bad enough we weren't allowed to be around humans anymore. What happens if your only companion in the world was an animal and you lost it? I called my grandma. She loves birds. She has dozens of bird houses and feeders and bird baths in her backyard. Whenever I used to visit her, we'd sit in the sunroom, no matter what time of year it was, so we could just watch them while we talked. She said it sounded like a parakeet and told me I might be right that someone lost it, but she'd also heard about people who were letting their birds go because they couldn't afford to care for them anymore. They thought a bird wouldn't have any trouble adapting to the wild, even if it had spent its whole life in captivity, but they were wrong. Were there cats in my neighborhood? She asked me ominously. Yeah, there were, I told her. I knew my grandma didn't approve of keeping birds in cages. She didn't approve of keeping goldfish in bowls either, or keeping granddaughters in their hometowns when they wanted to move across the country. But she wanted to save this bird, and a cage was probably the only way to do it. If I set one up in the backyard with the door open and food inside, the bird might fly down and eat. The problem was all the pet supply stores were closed. A cage could be ordered online, but probably wouldn't arrive for at least a couple days. Grandma doubted the bird would survive that long. After we hung up, I paced around my house feeling just useless and frustrated and more claustrophobic than usual. I looked out my front window out of habit and saw the old woman at her window, and an idea struck me. So I walked outside and started across the street. The woman The woman noticed me and couldn't have looked more terrified if I had been carrying an axe and a chainsaw dripping with blood. I stopped on the sidewalk, I smiled, I waved, and I hoped she wouldn't think I was a complete psycho. After a few minutes, her door cracked open. She was wearing a nightgown, and her face was flushed. "Hi! Sorry," I said to her. "I'm your neighbor from across the street. I don't mean to pry or anything, but I've noticed you looking outside your window, and you seem upset. Is everything okay in there?" "I'm fine, thank you," she said. "It's just, well, I've lost my bird." "Oh my God," I gasped. "Is he purple?" "Yes," she answered me excitedly. "He's a violet budgie." "I think he's in my backyard," I told her. We stared at each other, both of our mouths open, our eyes bulging. I can only imagine what we looked like. I knew that in this moment, she loved this bird more than anything in the world. And I also knew in that moment how much I missed my mom and my grandma and even my annoying little brother. The woman went on to explain how she let him out of his cage in the house every day, but she'd propped open a window during one of the warm days the week before and had forgotten about it. And she didn't have a screen for it, and he must have flown out. She said his name was Prince. "Cool," I blurted out, thinking this was one hip old lady. "You named him after Prince because he's purple. That's so cool." Purple Rain is one of my mom's favorite albums. She was in college when it came out. I grew up listening to the CD. And I sang some of I Would Die For You and performed a few of the Revolution's moves. She patiently watched me until I stopped. Then told me she named him Prince because purple is a royal color. Then she started to cough. At the sound, I automatically stepped back, even though we were already standing at least 10 feet apart. I thought about everything I'd heard about the virus. Once the symptoms started, it progressed very quickly. If she looked like this and sounded like this, she might have had it for a few days already. "You should go to the hospital," I told her. "I need to get Prince back," she said, and I realized that she'd been putting off going to the doctor until she found her bird. "Will you help me?" she asked and broke into more coughing. She went inside the house and returned with his cage. There was a chunk of mango inside of it. She set it down a few feet from her door and went back inside. I stared at the cage, and my heart started pounding. Would I be risking my life by touching it? I knew I could disinfect it and wash my hands, but would that be enough? I mean, everyone seemed to agree that the virus wasn't killing people my age, but even so, it was a terrible illness. I didn't want to get it. I lived alone. My family was thousands of miles away. I remembered how excited I was to leave them and leave my hometown 2 years ago, and now I'd do anything to be back there, to just see them again. Even if it was through a window. I picked up the cage. She was back at her window. She smiled and gave me a thumbs up. Prince wasn't in the tree when I got home. He was sitting on top of the backyard fence, a fence where I'd seen my neighbor's cat sit in the evenings. I wondered if the big orange Tom was already sizing up the bird for his dinner. I set down the cage with the door open and called out, "Here, Prince! Here, birdie, birdie, birdie!" I felt like such an idiot, but then I remembered I lived in a ghost town now. There was no one around to hear me. I called out to him again, and all of a sudden, he flew to the top of the cage and perched. We looked at each other. He squawked, and he climbed inside. Now my heart beat for an entirely different reason. I don't think I'd ever been more excited in my life. I shut and latched the door and hurried across the street with the cage. Tears streamed down the woman's face. "Thank you. Thank you," she called through the window. I realized I was crying too. She cracked open her door again and between coughing fits asked me if I would take care of him. while she went to go and see her doctor. She rattled off a few facts about Prince. He was 3 years old. He could live to be 10. His favorite treats, besides mango, were peas in a pod, grapes, carrots, and acorn squash. He knew his name. He spent several hours a day outside of his cage. He liked jingles from certain TV ads and would dance to them by bobbing up and down. I took Prince home and kept a vigil out my front window, waiting to see when she left. A few hours later, an ambulance came for her. Prince and I have been getting along great. It took a few days, but he perches on my arm now and he takes grapes from between my lips. It's really cute. I played him some of Prince's music. He didn't care for it, but it turns out he likes a lot of other 80s music. Duran Duran, Madonna, Lionel Richie. He loves Queen. He goes crazy for ba-da-dum, bum, bum. Another one bites the dust. Oh! It's been 2 weeks, and I know she's not coming back. She lived across the street from me for 2 years, and I never knew she existed. We probably would have liked each other. Maybe she would have helped ease the ache when I started to miss my grandma. And maybe I could have helped ease her loneliness if she was lonely. I know nothing about her, or her life, or family, if she had one. I haven't seen anyone at her house. All I know is that she loved her bird, and she gave her life for him. I guess I played a role in saving him too. I noticed him. I noticed her. My reward is Prince. Now I'm not alone. I didn't even know her name. I never thought to ask. Next time, I will. When things get back to normal, I'm gonna knock on the door of every house on my street and ask, "Is everything okay in there?"
Windows was written by Tawni O'Dell and performed by Brolin. It was directed by Mitchell Maxwell and produced by Lou Aronica and Mitchell Maxwell. The sound design is by Josh Milliken, and Carl Verwerk was the general manager. The song The In-Between was written by Casey Brevis and Sam Shuey and was performed by Alex Blue, Casey Brevis, and Sam Shuey. You can get it wherever music is sold or streamed. For a complete list of credits, visit us at audiodramainitiative.com.
I never really liked the quiet. I'd always choose the music and the crowd. But now the only voice I hear is whispering, "Slow down."
The little things you never notice, the comfort in the closeness of a hand, and all the ways we lead each other safely back to land. To understand, oh, that something happens in the in-between. The distance shows I've never known the forest for the trees.
It's beautiful and strange as something changes in the in-between.